Hi, Mike Nee from Constellation Research. I'm joined by Waqas Ahmed, VP of AI Development from OpenText. We're here to discuss one thing that has consistently been on top of mind for CIOs and IT leaders as we've shifted from 2025 to 2026. And that's how do we build AI that enterprises can actually let act? And if I step back, we certainly had 2025, a lot of breathless vision about what was possible. And this year, it's all been about operationalizing AI. How do we ensure AI and agentic solutions can act in trusted ways given any specific solution? Without trusted information, AI simply becomes another source of uncertainty. So Waqas, to the point on trusted information, you are the perfect person to help us frame what's happening here in the market. Since you and OpenText have spent literally decades helping enterprises manage information for knowledge workers to accomplish more with trusted information. Now we're talking about doing this for AI. And so no doubt heard many times, customers need to get their data AI ready. And that feels like an oversimplification. So first question to you, from your perspective, what does it actually mean to become AI ready? And how has that definition changed over the last year or years?
Thank you, Michael. So if we think about this, every enterprise is climbing a ladder in AI, from AI inside the applications they already use, chatbots sitting in a corner, to discrete agents, named agents in the application that users can invoke to help with their functions, to then agents crossing and snapping out of the boundaries of their application and being able to play with other agents within the enterprise ecosystem, to eventually, hopefully, applications transforming into collections of agents that are choreographed as an agentic swarm. But what we are seeing is that not a weakness of models that's causing these adoptions to fail and lose credibility, but a weakness in the context and the grounding and trust and measurement that people are encountering as they are implementing these AI solutions within the enterprise. And that is the gap in the enterprise that we need to fix to make the actual agentic solutions usable.
So, Waqas, I couldn't agree with you more. One thing I've certainly seen over and over again is that AI readiness has become an overloaded term. It's not about just cleaning data or standing up another model, exactly to your point. It's about whether enterprise information is understandable, governed, available in a way that AI can reliably reason over. And, that just gets into, the next question. If organizations understand that, why are so many AI initiatives still struggling to scale?
That's a very common experience. A lot of the pilots are stalling, and we are not actually putting into production what made for very impressive demos. If you think about this, it's not a lack of trust in the models that's driving this. It's for a number of problems. One of the most common problem is the data isn't trustworthy enough for AI. The answers we get from the agentic solutions, they look confident, but when you evaluate them, the answers are often inaccurate. Or there are fears over AI and security. Do we trust this enough to allow this agent to work on a patient record? And the answer, of course, often is that no. And even if you trust this, some of the times, there is no reliable way to prove AI quality on an ongoing basis. A small change in a prompt, a small change in the context can cause drifting. And often AI is trapped within individual applications. Even when it's useful, it cannot transform your enterprise because it's not working across applications. It's not mapping to the actual roles digital knowledge workers are playing inside the enterprise.
You work with a lot of development teams. What do even sophisticated teams get wrong when they're looking at these problems?
What they miss is that agents don't just operate on static data system of record. You have to build a full contextual history of the activities that occur within a business process. And that includes the actual system of record, the decisions that are being taken, and the execution of the processes across their life cycle, collecting that metadata and building a context graph and context tree in a way where it is live, reliable, but also governed. It's available to the right agent at the right time with appropriate security. The last thing you would want to do is to create an agent that can damage the enterprise at scale because it has unlimited access to all the data, regardless of the constraints or the bounds it's supposed to operate in.
I mean, you're so right. I mean, I think this is where too many folks think of this as, the traditional of just providing information, but you're really going to an action and you're making a decision. And therefore you need to have the information that's so often caught up in humans' heads. But that begs the question about, architectures. What do you actually need to scale AI initiatives? Because that gets back to well, frankly, what are one or two things that are actually missing on the architecture today? Why are AI projects stalling technically?
Yep. So a few things that we believe need to be established in the architecture in a foundation behind the AI solutions. One is your evaluation practice. So we call it eval ops. We derive this from DevOps, which is a consistent quality practice to ensure you have a way to baseline your outcomes to see if you are giving correct answers, and continue to measure that in production also to ensure that the answers are not drifting. Secondly, to create an identity and security context around your agents, so you are able to define the constraints and guardrails so that agents are not only giving accurate and precise answers, they're also staying within the bounds of your comfort and security. And thirdly, of course, to create a governed context layer around the agents so they can operate on real and precise data. And fourthly, to allow the agents to not be trapped inside of individual applications, but interact with other agents in the ecosystem as well to provide end-to-end process and solutions.
It's really interesting that we're seeing the rise of things like loop engineering. The whole thing is, how do you set up the question and the automation that then continues to learn? And you're talking about all the right things, which was, how do I make sure I capture the information so I can have that evals, that I am increasingly, because the data or the action is going to be non-deterministic, how do I make sure I actually have the policies and guardrails so I can trust it to scale? And when does it have to ask a human because it just doesn't know? But it does get into the fact that we're really getting into areas which have been human only, which is, like you said, these kind of not trapped in individual silos where automation was fundamentally easier. Now, that said, do you have a customer example of where they struggled? Like, where do they know they had a problem?
One example that I would like to highlight that a lot of people can relate to is incident management. When you are operating in an operational environment and you have a lot of incidents and alerts coming to you, humans often fail to scale, to correlate signals across many alerts to figure out what exactly is the cause of this incident. And that's exactly a scenario that's made up for AI, because we are not working on static algorithms that say, if this happens, then that. You actually have to analyze a lot of the context. What changes were made in your platform recently? What other incidents have occurred recently? How was this type of problem solved the last time? This is exactly where AI works really well, because it can combine that context into a coherent story and figure out not just the most likely cause of that problem, but also recommend actions to actually solve the problem. And that's an area where we actually have applied those incident management solutions ourselves in our own environment, and we are seeing value at scale where the time to identify the root cause and resolve the solution has gone down significantly.
That's a perfect example. I mean, and this is where remembering what we talked about last time we spoke, or the fact that, just an example for me, if I'm calling 2 weeks ahead of my flight, that's one set of context. If I'm 30 minutes before my flight and I'm not checked in, United should know that I'm in a different context. But you and I have talked about OpenText, building solutions to solve a bunch of these solutions. Question for you is, what gaps does OpenText really solve that customers are not addressing, like with LLMs or RAGs or chatbot layers?
Yep. I think our banner statement here is that we have the secure information management experience for the past 30 years. We know what context actually is. Customers can get the frontier model access from all the model providers, but those models are useless without being able to access accurate and governed information. And OpenText is solving this at scale, where not only do we have the data, we also have the context of how the business processes execute. And sometimes we say that we know more about the business processes of the customers than they themselves, because we are the one who are actually seeing all the metadata evolve from it. And we can actually apply the agentic identity on that data to ensure that we are not giving raw signals to these models, but we are actually providing a context within which they can operate successfully.
Now, what's important, what you said, and I love it, is that technology itself really is the limiting factor. But that brings us to information architecture. Let's talk about information architecture for AI and information management, which you guys are the masters of. Historically, trust meant governing information, right? And so as AI agents begin interacting with enterprise systems, trust gets managed continuously at runtime rather than something we define during deployment. This is something you and I were talking about. What does that really mean here? And spell it out a little bit for folks who are listening.
Sure. There are two important factors in there. One is that when you are interacting with an agent and in a question and answer experience as a chatbot, it's essentially working on your behalf. Every question you ask, it's trying to get the answer by applying your permissions. But when you operate an agentic system at scale, it goes beyond being a shadow of any one person. So you have to have both visibility and governance and management of the many agentic identities that you are going to let loose in your system. Secondly, you need to be able to capture the actual executions from these agentic solutions and be able to measure their outcomes, both to see the reliability in the solutions as well as for audit and provenance purposes. You are going to want to see how a certain decision was made and is it made reliably, consistently, if the same inputs are given to the same agentic problem again. And it's the gap in the reliability that causes enterprises to lose trust and not put their pilots into production. And that's where OpenText is trying to solve these problems so that not only can you operate within grounded, governed context, you also are maintaining good information about your agentic ecosystem, be able to operate under agentic identities, and also measure on an ongoing basis the outcome to ensure that you're guarding against drift, and you also have a good provenance track record.
But how is OpenText solving these challenges? What are some of the things that OpenText is bringing to the table that really helps preserve, not only enforce, but preserve this trust and the ability to scale automation like this?
So first and foremost, we bring our 30 years of enterprise information management experience to ensure that we can build a system of context around the data, which means not giving raw data, because we are more than just a file system. We are able to understand what are the permissions for different users, systems, and play them downstream as well as additional context is derived from the raw data. That's the hardest part of maintaining governance on information. And secondly, we are ensuring that we are recognizing agents as first-class identities, actors in the system, and we are even creating agentic identity management solutions. And thirdly, we are ensuring that there is a consistent, comprehensive evaluation foundation under all of our solutions, so we can not only prove how certain decisions were made, but also be able to consistently measure how those systems are behaving in production and create a feedback loop where we are ensuring there are appropriate controls and path for human involvement, human in the loop cycles, so we can have appropriate guardrails in the overall solution as well.
And I think this idea of context, I just want to double click on that, because so many folks actually misunderstand what it is and therefore how important it is. If I was just going to drill down a little bit on what you said, for me, context is three things. One, what does it mean? And a lot of people get stuck there. It's semantics, relationships, ontologies. And a lot of folks have those pieces, some people picking up from the BI. But you have to get to what's important now and what should I do about it? And that is an important set of questions that takes experience. This company, I'm 30 minutes from my flight and my GPS says I'm not even close to the airport yet. All right, now I'm in a very different set of situations where the call center agent should be choosing a different set of options for me. The context really matters, and what actions should they have available to them? They're in an escalated mode. It's maybe a different set of actions that an agent during a normal context would not have access to. The question I get once you start putting this in place is, how do agents earn more autonomy? This may sound strange, but how do agents earn more autonomy over time? We usually start off very guardrailed.
Yep.
But you spoke a little bit about eval ops. Is this how we think about building trust and how we start adding more capabilities, allowing agents to do more and more automation?
You should think of your agents as hiring a new employee. What do you do on day one? You give them limited access and you ensure that you're giving them the information, the corporate policies, the procedures, data access, and then you are very closely watching what they are doing. What actions did they perform? What functions did they execute? And as they go through some cycles of solving a few problems, you use the outcome of those problems to see how much more autonomy can you give them, and what are the approval points where an action of theirs has to come to you or somebody else who can review and approve this. So this is a reinforcement cycle that allows you to expand more and more capabilities to them and making them more autonomous. This is the same thing that you have to implement in an agentic ecosystem. And that relies on there being a foundation of governed access, measurement, and evaluations. Once again, the two places where we are calling out OpenText plays strong, context and evals.
Absolutely. And once organizations have confidence in runtime trust, something interesting does happen. And we've seen this over and over again with the leaders. The conversation shifts from can AI help someone do their job, which has been very hard to prove ROI sometimes. Productivity, yes. ROI, But then it gets to what work should AI really own? And that's where re-engineering processes to leverage AI, where McKinsey says, hey, you get 3x returns on AI initiatives. When you really start rethinking processes with AI in mind, is where you start getting that unlock. But let's drill down to get a little more reality. We've talked about this a little abstractly. As you start going from assistance to automation, let's talk about a customer story. Like, where are you actually seeing AI move from assistance to actually automating them, right? Do you have a customer story about how AI is actually starting to take on work that drives measurable outcomes?
Yep. So we have an example for a big customer of ours is using our content management system. And in this case, it has hundreds of thousands of records. And the previous internal HR processes required them to go through these employee records to create compensation letters. And this is something that you cannot simply query a database and get the records generated. You actually have to apply lots of contextual decision making on it to create those recommendations and generate those letters. And this is exactly what they were able to do by interacting with our what we call Content Aviator, our AI solution for content management solutions. And their ecosystem was able to make calls for all these hundreds of thousands of employees and generate those comp letters in a matter of hours, what would have taken a number of weeks for them to actually accomplish otherwise.
That's, like you said, we're starting to see stories just like that over and over again, but there is a work that has to be done. That gets into, how do you know when things are working? I mean, clearly this was a project that you had to step up into. How do you know when things were actually working? And maybe even more importantly, how do you know when something is not working?
Exactly. So we actually spend a lot of time in defining the domain-specific metrics that differ for different solutions. An example I often give is that in the deterministic world of software engineering, determining what the right answer was simple. Hey, you click on this button in this screen and does this happen? Yes. So that's your QA test. In the non-deterministic world of AI, where even giving the same question results in slightly different answer every single time, you actually have to develop a new practice of establishing what your baseline truths are. And those truths are not the same in every single application. For content management, it may be the preciseness, the language, the grammar of summarizing some text. In the world of application development management, it may be the creation of a test case from a user problem that determines if it's correct or not. So we have to develop a practice, create a baseline of those metrics, and then create an engineering system to actually run those cycles of evaluations and compare your degradation or improvement for every system change that you make.
Because we're getting to the end of our time, and as sad as it makes me, Many organizations have proven AI works in these isolated pilots. The next challenge is really operationalization, as we were just saying. If you are advising CIOs and IT leaders, CDAOs, what's the one capability that every enterprise AI platform will need that you're saying few organizations are thinking about today?
Grounding and provenance. You need to be able to prove that your agents are working consistently. If you have an excellent demo that solves a problem, but the very next day in production, there is significant drift, either because of a change in a prompt that triggers the question, or a minor change in the system, a model upgrade, that's going to lose reliability and trust quickly. So what you want to do to roll out agents at scale is to ensure that your measurement system, your evaluation system across your enterprise is in place.
And that means actually knowing that domain. It means knowing the types of information that actually feed and can drive the part, how that decision was being made and how that action was also being taken. So spot on. Let me just wrap up then. Waqas, thank you for joining. One theme that came through today, was enterprise AI isn't just deploying more intelligence. I mean, I think we're getting to a point where we're going to pay for different levels of intelligence because it's getting expensive to always have the frontier. It's about operationalizing trust. And you are spot on, hitting that over and over again. This is a challenge that every CIO, IT leader, CDIO is wrestling with today. And I appreciate you sharing both your perspective and some of the hard-learned lessons of how do you bring into context and this information to not only humans but also to agents, so they can make better decisions and drive more and more automation. So before we wrap up, if our audience were to learn more about your work with OpenText, where should they go? Where should they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn, of course, but I welcome them to come to our OpenText website, opentext.com. And that's where they can find our blogs and our latest AI innovation in each of our business unit and domains.
Thank you for everyone watching. I'm Mike Ney, VP Principal Analyst at Constellation Research. We help enterprise leaders understand technologies, market shifts, and architectural decisions that drive business outcomes. And we look forward to seeing you in our next conversation. Again, thank you all. Thank you, Waqas.
Thank you.